All right, folks, it is the second week of March, and here we are at long last, 4 episodes into the DoD IG report on the C3PAO accreditation process for the CMMC program. This is the fourth and final, at long last, final installment of our deep dive into the long-awaited DoD Inspector General Report, looking at the process for authorizing the companies that will come and assess you under the CMMC program. Today, we're going to talk about the appendix to the report, the allegations that were received on the DoD Inspector General hotline after they announced the audit, and see if there's anything, if there's any there. That's what we're going to talk about today.
I'm still standing firm in my belief that this is just a slow build, a Jacob Horn slow build story. And just like he tells everybody that in order to get the best of any document that you read, you have to read the last part of it first and then get into the meat and potatoes. So I'm hoping, after sitting through 3 episodes and wondering where the smoking gun everybody was talking about is, I'm hoping that this is the episode that we find it. I think the audience is hoping the same as well.
Yeah, maybe it's here. Maybe it's in the appendix at the back of the report, because we've gone through all 10 recommendations in excruciating detail over the course of the last 3 or 4 weeks. And there's not much there. So let's go through.
History tells us that appendixes are where the action's at anyway, right?
Of course. The footnotes, the appendices, that's where the good stuff is at. So maybe this is where the sword hanging over CMMC will finally get cut loose, and all the predictions around this report being the thing that's going to kill CMC will come to fruition. So just as a quick review, DoD contractors that maintain controlled unclassified information that is critical to national security must undergo CMMC Level 2 assessments performed by an authorized CMMC third-party assessment organization known as a C3PAO. In November of 2020, the DoD issued a no-cost contract to the CMMC accreditation body, now known as the Cyber AB, to manage the C3PAO authorization process and ensure that candidate C3PAOs meet the requirements. The candidate C3PAOs must successfully complete a series of 12 requirements before they can be authorized to perform CMMC Level 2 assessments. The DoD Inspector General sought to determine whether the DoD ensured that 12-step process for authorizing these organizations to perform these assessments was effectively implemented. In order to do that, they reviewed the application packages for 11 of the 48 at the time C3PAOs that had been authorized to perform assessments. This was as of September of 2023. They also observed 3 of those CMMC Level 2 assessments that are conducted by DoD's own internal auditors from an organization known as DIBCAC. Overall, the IG made 10 recommendations, which we have covered in tremendous detail in the first 3 episodes of this series, which we'll link below. You can find those there. We split them up based off of who they were relevant to in the ecosystem. Today, we're talking about the last piece of the report, allegations received from people finding out that there was going to be an audit of this process, calling the Inspector General hotline and telling them that there were things that they needed to investigate that were unseemly, that were not correct, that were worthy of the IG's time, and that needed to be investigated. So,
So I just want to double check. If they announced that they're going to do this audit of the DoD in this entire process, right? And if they were to receive something on this allegation hotline that they felt was relevant to investigate, if it was pertaining to the authorization process of the C3PAOs, and they found something as a result of that, that would have shown up in this report?
Yeah, they would.
Okay.
So you can call the Inspector General hotline at any time, and you can tell them, be like, hey, this process is messed up. Whistleblower hotline, full anonymity, that whole process. And people have been doing this for years on the CMMC program to various degrees that have really never gone anywhere. And so the IG announces that they're investigating, they're looking into this authorization process. And so they get phone calls on the IG hotline that'd be like, you need to look at this. I have this experience and it wasn't correct. You need to look at this. And if they're true, they would make recommendations according to those findings that they were able to substantiate. So the question is, were the allegations substantiated? So just very quickly, just for everybody's reference, right, within this authorization process, within this CMMC ecosystem, there's a bunch of different organizations that have a bunch of different responsibilities associated with authorizing C3PAOs. There's the Cyber AB, there is the CMMC Program Management Office, which is sometimes referred to as the CMMC PMO. And then there's the Defense Industrial Base Cybersecurity Assessment Center, which is also known as DIBCAC, which is a organization underneath the Defense Contract Management Agency under DCMA. Those are the big three in charge of facilitating the process of authorizing a company to become an assessment organization that you pay to go through your CMMC assessments. So 30 pages into this thing, you get to Appendix B, allegations. And they say, after the IG announced the audit, they received 3 allegations on the DoD IG hotline. The first allegation, somebody called the IG and they said, DIBCAC did not do the following things that they were supposed to do. They did not provide me, the candidate C3PAO, with assessment guidelines before they performed the assessment. They didn't review the documentation that I provided that supported the implementation of my requirements. They didn't provide comments supporting their determinations that some of my requirements weren't implemented. And they didn't have a process for appealing their decision when they said that I didn't implement anything. Hey, IG, what the hell is going on? Go look into this. You're gonna love it. You're gonna find all this crazy stuff. They didn't do any of the things that they were supposed to do within the course of a DIBCAC assessment. So the IG goes, wow, that's a crazy story. So they went and they reviewed all email correspondence between this candidate C3PAO and DIBCAC. They reviewed the assessment report that DIBCAC generated, and they met and discussed what happened with the DIBCAC assessors themselves. And the IG found that actually DIBCAC did provide the candidate C3PAO with assessment guidelines 104 days before the scheduled assessment, which the candidate C3PAO would have been aware of because they were the ones who were like, hey, well, you need to get scheduled for an assessment. DIBCAC actually did review the documentation regarding the implementation of their control environment. DIBCAC did provide the assessment results, including explanations for the assessor determination that 23 of the 110 requirements weren't implemented at all. They provided preliminary findings within 6 days after the assessment was concluded. They provided final findings 45 days after the assessment concluded. And they even give an example where they said the candidate C3PAO never implemented a control for remediating vulnerabilities in accordance with risk assessments because they had never even conducted a risk assessment. So they got their preliminary results in December of 2022. They got their final results in January of 2023. And then later on in March of 2023, the candidate C3PAO requested an appeal. At the time, DIBCAC did not have a formal appeals process. However, DIBCAC still directed the candidate C3PAO to provide additional information in support of their request for an appeal. And they emailed them 2 more times asking for additional details about the 23 unimplemented requirements. The candidate provided a list of determinations they disagreed with, no supporting documentation to help them change their mind whatsoever. DIBCAC still went back and reviewed the decisions internally. And then in April, they said there's no evidence for us to overturn our initial assessment decisions. And then later on, they implemented a formal appeals process that is now in existence if you go through a DIBCAC assessment. Absolutely false allegation. Every single thing that they said on the allegation submitted to the IG hotline was completely made up and not at all accurate whatsoever.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you kind of bend the facts of an argument to fit the narrative in which you want, the narrative of the outcome in which you want, right? Obviously, we want to blow the whistle here because we failed our C3PAO assessment from DIBCAC. And we're going to say that all of these things happen, but then DIBCAC's like, yo, I got receipts. And here are the receipts for every single thing. And okay, so you don't agree with these 23 controls that we found deficiencies with. Give us more details, probably asking more questions of the C3PAO. Okay, so tell me how you have this implemented. Give me your assurance claim for the implementation of this control, right? And what happened? Crickets. So why would you expect a different outcome than what you got from there? So the best part about it is is that this allegation did, possibly uncover a deficiency in the process, which is the appeals. And so now there is an appeals process that's established that will stop this kind of long drawn out scenario from happening with this allegation. But yeah, you're right. It's false. It's just basically salty tears.
Yeah, maybe the second allegation is the thing that exposes the fact that this is all a farce.
It's a slow build, bro. It's a slow build.
Second allegation out of 3. The Cyber AB did not comply with its contractual requirements to obtain accreditation under the ISO 17011 standard. So the IG, right? The AB's got to get this ISO certification. Yeah. They didn't comply with their contract. Blow the whistle. Kill the program. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. It's all a fraud.
None of the certifications are real.
Nothing matters.
Yeah.
So the IG reviewed the no-cost contract that the DoD awarded to the Cyber AB in 2020. Okay. They reviewed the contract modification that was issued in November of 2023, and they met with the Cyber AB regarding their plans to achieve ISO 17011. Okay. And they found that the original deadline for achieving this ISO standard was April of 2023 under CMMC 1.0, but the contract was modified to change the deadline to 24 months from the effective date of the 32 CFR CMMC final rule. The effective date of that rule was December 16th of 2024. So the deadline for the Cyber AB to achieve this ISO certification is not until December of 2026, right? So this makes sense because the program rule didn't come out for 3 years after it was announced. And so the deadline for the AB to achieve their requirements, just like everybody else, gets pushed to the right in accordance with the timeline of rulemaking. So this was not true at all. The IG goes, the AB is compliant with the terms of their contract. They haven't violated a term of their contract. They, if anything, they're ahead of schedule, according to what Matt Travis and everybody's saying on the town hall, because they were supposed to achieve 17011 by December of 2026. So they got plenty of time based off what we know right now. This allegation is not true. I hear this one on LinkedIn a lot where people go, whoa, they're supposed to have their ISO cert. All these certifications mean nothing. The AB is in violation of their contract. This is a scandal. This is an outrage. Apparently not.
Yeah. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the requirements of the ISO cert that they have to get, some of the things that they have to adhere to were things that were established in 32 CFR went final, right?
Exactly.
So the entire time, it wasn't like they were just sitting around, when am I going to get ISO? There was finalization of a rule that had to take place. And everybody knows that, obviously how fast that or slow that went, right? So yeah, again, absolutely false, waste of time.
You can't get an ISO 17011 cert to be an accreditation body under a program whose rule hasn't been published yet.
100%.
So that's why, right? That's why.
And that's commonly what we see with a lot of the things that people are like, oh, it's shifting. This is so bad. Or they're not doing this. This is so bad. Yeah, they couldn't do it because they were waiting and they were trying to foresee interpretations of a final rule. And so they were trying to be proactive about it. And then that's why the shifts.
How are you going to get certified? How do you get certified to a program that doesn't exist yet? Same reason why you couldn't get a CMMC certification beforehand either.
Yeah.
So when you hear this, which I know you're going to hear it, you're going to hear it a bunch. When you hear people say the AB is in violation of their contract, they don't have their ISO cert, it's not true. Now, if we get to December of 2026 and they still don't have their ISO cert, that's a different story. But as it stands right now, it's not an issue. Okay, last allegation, end of the road.
This has to be
it. This has to be it. This is what they did. They buried it. I know what they did. They put it all the way at the end, and they were like, we're going to reward you for reading the entire report. This is it, everybody. Yes. This is what you've been waiting for. 4 whole weeks to build up to this process. I've been teasing it and teasing it and teasing it. Here's the thing that kills CMMC. Allegation number 3. During a DIBCAC assessment of a candidate C3PAO, assessors requested evidence of security requirements that were the responsibility of a cloud service provider. According to the complaint on the DoD IG hotline, DIBCAC assessors mandated that the candidate C3PAO download the information, even though the cloud service provider agreement said the documentation must remain on government-furnished equipment. The complaint went on to say that DIBCAC was unaware of this limitation, and they're making candidate C3PAOs violate legal agreements with cloud service providers' sensitive security documentation. Ooh, boy. So the IG reviewed the candidate C3PAO's responses to the assessment scope intake form. This is a form that documents information collected from the candidate to support their readiness for assessment. We did a whole episode on CMMC false starts. That's what they're talking about here. Mm-hmm. They reviewed the DIBCAC assessor's notes from this assessment, and they met with DIBCAC to go over what happened.
Okay.
And the results of looking into the details here, there was no evidence indicating that DIBCAC assessors requested the candidate C3PAO download the CSP security documentation to their network. Before initiating the assessment, the DIBCAC lead requested a list of the cyber requirements that the cloud service provider was responsible for implementing, and the DIBCAC directed them to the DoD procurement toolbox for how to facilitate the ability to show what their CSP is responsible for and what they're responsible for. We'll add a link to the DoD procurement toolbox cybersecurity FAQs in terms of how to show who's responsible for what under FedRAMP equivalency. No evidence that this allegation was true at all whatsoever, period, end of story. All right, moving on to the... Oh, wait, there are no more allegations. There are no more findings. There are no more recommendations. There's no other information in this report whatsoever. So here we are, everybody, at the end of 4 weeks of a lot of your time. If you've listened all the way here, thank you for listening to it. We don't typically go into this level of detail on these reports, but I felt like it was going to be valuable for historical purposes because you know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen. Couple weeks, couple months are going to go by, and then sure enough, this is going to come back around, and people are going to go, what about the IG report? People won't have read it. They won't have known what it says. They'll Google it, whatever, and they're going to see the first page of the report that makes everything seem like all these findings are horrible, dumpster fire, open issues. It's not going to have any of the details, not going to have any of the subtlety, and then people are going to run with it. It's going to cause a lot of confirmation bias. It's going to cause people to hesitate, and that only hurts people who have to comply with these requirements and get their certification. So if you take nothing else away from the fact that we really do read these things, we really do actually go into the detail and try to just summarize what's going on. You just have to be very careful about the news around what's going on with CMMC, especially if it's news around CMMC or social media posts that are telling you that the program is doomed or that it's going away or that this one thing is going to be the nail in the coffin and that's going to derail the program and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Because when you actually read this stuff, that's not what it says.
I think you'll agree, Jacob, that if this report took place right now, right, and these findings and results were right now, after 32 CFR went final, all of these things were taking place after there was a finalized rule, after the reauthorization process and everything, I would have an issue with it. I feel like the two biggest things that we found in the entirety of the report were the difference in opinion with the adequacy and sufficiency of the implementation of the control that DIBCAC had, right? Wherein like they're like, well, we'll do further training, we'll do a spot test, and the IG was like, no, we want you to do every single thing. I still agree with the DIBCAC's perspective there. I just wish that there was some common ground that would have been met there for that finding still not to be outstanding, right? Like so. Yeah. Other than that, like you're right. Like I think that what this report represents is that if you were living in the past, if you were living in the land of lore where CMMC potentially was growing away, and every week you turned around and there was actually something to spark some interest of some deceit going on, this report was the smoking gun that you were looking for. Unfortunately, some people are still living in the past and they think that this is the smoking gun they're looking for. We read the whole report past the first page. We did the work so you didn't have to, and I kind of wish that we would have did something else with half the time.
Yeah, well, we got through it. We got
maybe
through
a
it.
real
You guys
IG
got through
report.
it.
Like
Thanks
since
for...
we're digging at IG reports, maybe like, come on, buddy, bring out the dark side.
It's yeah. So we got through the report. We'll get back onto the normal pace of our sort of typical assortment of topics that we normally go into. But these are here for your reference, right? They're here for your reference in order to sort through and reorder the way that they're written, because they're not exactly the easiest things to parse through. But it just goes to show you got to be careful where you get your information from. There's really nothing better than reading it for yourself. But yeah, this is not what it was made out to be. It's not what it's going to be made out to be. And meanwhile, we took a break actually from this series and did an episode on the DoD memo that was just released that converts the 32 CFR CMMC regulation into guidance for contracting officers about determining who is going to get self-assessment or not, who's going to get waivers or not, how it's going to work in the phased rollout. As soon as the 48 CFR rule comes out, which is going to happen now in like 60 to 120 days, probably at the time of this conversation. So if you're still focused on things like the IG report, don't be, because it doesn't say what people said it says, and you got a lot bigger problems to worry about in terms of CMMC getting ready to show up in your contracts. So we'll get back on track talking about when that's going to happen, what that's going to look like, how to think about controls, all the cool stuff that we got coming up from there. But we went through it. It was a fun experiment. It was a fun adventure. I'm sure everybody had a blast. I know I did. So there you go, everybody. That's the IG report in a 4-part series nutshell, if you will. And let us know what you think. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.